What's going on, you guys? You're tuned into the Cutting Room Knife Review. I'm your host, Garrett, and today we're taking a look at a knife that I probably should have taken a look at a long time ago. But before we get into that knife, I want to ask you guys a question. What do you get when you mix a Benchmade 940 Osborne and a Chris Reeve Sabenza? What's up, guys? I'm Garrett. You're tuned into the Cutting Room Knife Review, where I review knives, blades, and all things sharp. Please like and subscribe so I can keep bringing you more killer knife content. Give up? That's right, you get a Piratech Tsunami, or Kraken as it was called when I first bought this knife. Now, the Tsunami, we'll call it just for the sake that I don't get in trouble for its namesake. I'm pretty sure that for some reason there was another knife that made them change their knife name because there was two models that had the same name. So this is now called the Tsunami. It was once called the Kraken. But the Tsunami is an interesting knife. It's a fairly nice knife. I wouldn't call it an incredibly nice knife. It's got some cool features to it. I think it's pretty useful. It's a really good size. I like the size of this knife a lot. But basically, we have just a few key features to this knife. And then after that, it's kind of up to whether it's the style of knife you like or not, whether it would be for you. Now, some of the coolest things about this knife are that it has no screws showing through the scales on either side. And the way it does that is by having these scales kind of lock and unlock magnetically to the frame. So it has a steel frame. It has a crossbar lock. We have a titanium scales and a titanium clip. We have an S90V sheepsfoot blade with a flat grind on it. And other than that, it's fairly plain Jane. Is it my favorite knife? It's not. Is it a good knife? It is. Is it a unique knife? I think so. So let's take a look at the specifications and dimensions and materials that make up this knife we call the Tsunami. So the Piratech Tsunami, or I keep wanting to call it a Kraken because that's what it was called when I originally bought this, but the Piratech Tsunami is a 7.63 inch overall length knife. It has a blade length of 3.22 inches, a blade thickness of 0.11 inches, and a blade width of 0.97 inches. That's all pretty standard fare. I really do like that the blade, the sheepsfoot blade, utilizes basically the entire length of the blade as an effective edge. I do tip my hat to Piratech for that fact. I love lots of edge on smaller knives. The more compact you can get the knife while still being comfortable in my hand with the most amount of edge for me to use, the better, in my opinion. Now, the handle length is 4.41 inches. The handle width is 1.02 inches, and it's all made from titanium. Now, the hardware is stainless steel, including the crossbar lock, the frame, and there are screws in this. They're just covered up by this magnetic titanium scale. I'm not going to be removing the titanium scales because, to tell you the truth, it's a pain in the butt. It really is. You have to do it just perfectly or they don't move at all. I think once you get it down 2 or 3 times, it's a good thing, and not too hard of a thing, but I haven't really removed these but once, and it was kind of a hassle. So basically we have just spacers, no back spacer. We just have these spacers in it, just like the 940 has in it. We have a little finger cutout for it. And we do have a nice amount of jimping back here on about halfway down the spine of the blade. And we have this little notch at the tip of the blade that is very comfortable to put our finger on for a pinch grip. This is an amazing knife to pinch grip. I will give it that. It is a great, great pinch gripping knife. So basically, this knife is, in my opinion, a pretty good size for, everyday carry. It really is. Even though it doesn't really float my boat that much, the size itself of the knife is very, very conducive to what I like. This blade has a lot of usable edge on all 3.22 inches of the blade. The blade is S90V, by the way, and that is a steel that I absolutely love. So hats off to that. They are all HRC tested to 61 plus or minus 1, and every single blade has the marks in it for being tested. So each blade gets tested by the OEM that Piratech uses. Piratech is a Chinese knife, so there is an OEM that makes this knife. I am not sure what OEM makes this knife. I think that it's always been kind of a bit of a mystery. I don't think they let on to who makes their knives. Although from the feel of the knife, I would think that it would be, if I was going to guess, and I'm not even sure it's cool to guess these things. I'm not sure like whether that's like kosher or not. When Metal Complex does it, he always rhymes it with, I think it's a company that rhymes with Fiat, and of course he'd be talking about Riot. If that was the case, I'm not saying that's the case for this knife, but in my opinion, like it's a very high end OEM that's doing it. I don't think one of like the lesser quality OEMs are doing it. I would say it's one of the big two. It's obviously not Kunwu. I think we can all agree that this is not a Kunwu, but who knows? Maybe it is. But if I was to venture a guess, it would be between Best Tech and Riot, and I'm not going to venture a guess though. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's somebody completely different. It has a nice fit and finish to the knife. The satin finish of the blade is really nice. It's kind of a fingerprint magnet, but that's okay. The scales are good quality titanium, although they just catch snail trails. As you can probably see, I barely carried this knife. I have barely ever carried this knife. I really didn't dig this thing, to tell you the truth. It didn't really like do it for me. But the very little that I carried it just got snail trailed up so fast, you guys. And so it is what it is. Honestly, that doesn't bother me with knives. My Sabenza has a few snail trails on it, though I will say it's got like a glass blasted finish to it. I think it might be like a bead blasted finish. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's a bead blast finish. I'm sorry. So it's a little bit it's like in between a sand blast and a glass blast. The bead blasted finish is a fairly nice texture, but for some reason this one just gets snail trailed really easy. But if you look at the knife, it's basically it really is. I mean, Metal Complex was dead on when he said, I think this feels like a cross between a Chris Reeve Sabenza and a 940 Osborne. And I've always joked around that that's like, it's a love child between these two knives, but it really is. It feels a lot like the 940 Osborne. You can tell that the people that made this knife, Piratech, were big fans of this 940 Osborne. The blade shape is very similar. The overall length of the knife is very similar, and the feel to the action with the crossbar lock is really fairly similar. I think that the Tsunami is superior to the 940, and I could be biased. I'm really not a Benchmade guy, you guys. I am 120% a Spyderco fan, and if you know anything about Spyderco and Benchmade, it's like the Red Sox and the Yankees, the Padres and the Dodgers. You know, it's the Chargers and the Raiders. It's just they're like, it's like rivalry between them, and there's no good reason for there to be Benchmade and Spyderco rivalry, but the fans of each knife tend to like flock to either being loyal to one side or the other, and Benchmade has never really tickled my fancy. And I own this Benchmade 940 Osborne because I am waiting on an REK reblade for the 940 Osborne. And so I'm really excited to check out this knife once it's got a reblade by REK Knives. That should be amazing. But really, all that it's going to be is going to be the the frame and the lock that's going to be left, because I'm going to get rid of these scales and this. I'm going to get rid of this blade, and it'll be pretty much just like the way that my Shaman is not really a Shaman anymore. This knife will no longer be a Benchmade. But getting back to the Kraken, I think the Kraken's nicer than a Benchmade Osborne. I just do. It has a nicer steel. You can get the Benchmade Osborne in S90V steel. I think you'll pay a little bit more than this knife. The Kraken base model, which is the one that we're looking at right here, goes for $300 flat, which is a pretty good deal for a titanium scale super steel knife. It's got good action. It runs on bearings. It's really smooth. I'm not a crossbar lock fan, you guys. I don't think it's a bad locking system. I don't think it's a bad locking system at all. I think it's actually fairly durable. It's nice that it's ambidextrous. But I'm not a crossbar lock fan. I'm just not. I'm a frame lock guy. I'd rather have a compression lock or a frame lock personally. But this does kind of give you a feel with the scales, just how it sits in your hand. It's not very far off a Sebenza. Now I have a small Sebenza right here. I have parted ways with my large Sebenza. I let it go to a home that was going to show it more love than I was showing it at the time. I had a Sebenza that was incredibly nice, and it was a really expensive paperweight for me. It was a Safe Queen, and I don't really do Safe Queens over here too much. And so since I couldn't bear to use it, I sold it to a friend, and he's loving it now. That's great. But I have this plain Jane small Sebenza that I absolutely love, and I love using this knife. And I really do feel like it's a mix between these two knives. I don't feel like it's a mix between the large Sebenza and this knife as much. I feel like it has a bit more of a small Sebenza feel to it as far as how the scales are in your hand. The large Sebenza is kind of beefy compared to this one. Now, I will say this. Chris Reeve, if you are listening to my review, for some reason, Chris Reeve, if you're listening to my Piratech review, make us an in-between size Sebenza and Nkosi. If you made a Sebenza that was this big, if you look at the Sebenza compared to this, the small Sebenza compared to the Piratech, if you made a Sebenza that was just this big, just this much bigger, or an Nkosi that was just this much bigger, not your full size, but just this size, it would be amazing for all of us that have big hands, where this is almost too small. The small Sebenza is just like almost too small for my hand. So anyway, that's my little plea to Chris Reeves, because that's one thing that Piratech did nail. It is a perfect fit in my hand. I do love that about this knife. It is a really good feel, really good fit in my hand. The size of the handle and how my thumb lays up on the blade and just how everything fits in my hand is very nice. It really is. It's really nice. So let's take a look at the Piratech Kraken, or Tsunami, I'm sorry, the Piratech Tsunami, and let's take a look at it next to some other knives and compare it to some of its competition. Okay, so the Piratech Kraken. I mean, the Piratech Tsunami. Sorry, guys. So I think one thing I forgot to state about this knife is that it is a 4.16 ounce knife. It is right in the middle. It's not heavy. It's not light. It feels substantial enough to use for hard use. I think that it doesn't feel like the most heavy duty knife, but it definitely doesn't feel like it's unsubstantial or it's going to float away on you or just break on you. So the first knife that we will compare this knife to, like always, the Para 3. This is next to the Spyderco Para 3. And as we can see, it's a little bit longer than the Para 3. Just a little bit. We got a lot more blade edge, though, compared to the Para 3. So a lot more edge to be working with. Of course, it's a modified sheep's foot style blade. But it definitely packs a lot of blade into a smaller package. If you look at the handle shape, our handles are pretty close to the same between the Para 3 and the Tsunami. But you're getting a lot more blade than you are with the Para 3. Not to knock the Para 3. I absolutely love this knife, and honestly, I would carry this before I would carry this, but that's a whole nother story. Crossbar locks aren't for me, guys. I'm sorry. I'm just, they just aren't. They really aren't. The Manix 2 is really the only crossbar lock that I really dig all the time. Now, this is a Paramilitary 2 next to the Piratech Tsunami. And as you can see, we have a little bit longer of a knife, but in reality, if you look at the blade, the edge, we're dealing with almost exactly the same edge size. So Piratech's done a really good job of putting a lot of edge, a lot of, you got a lot of working space with this knife. This is what you're going to be working with. You're not working with anything over here. You're working with this right here. And while there's more to grip onto with the Paramilitary 2, it definitely feels like more substantial in my hand. I got a bigger knife in my hand. Really, the blade says otherwise. The effective blade edge is basically the same. It's really close to the same, you guys. So that is one thing that Piratech did really good on it. As we can see, this is a very, very straight knife. So if we're going to need to use the blade away from our hand, or else if we choke up on it, we're going to be cutting off some of that very effective blade length with our knuckle. I do find that I can choke up on this without really putting my finger into this edge of the blade, but it's really not meant for that. That's a sharpening trail right there, you guys. I don't really find myself choking up on this knife a lot for fear of poking myself with this corner. I've never done it, but I'm not about to start. So the next knife I kind of wanted to put next to this is, we're going to run down the line with a couple, different knives. We have Spyderco's, probably in my opinion, their best sheep's foot. We have the Smock. And these are actually pretty similar feels, in my opinion. I would use these knives for the same thing. I would use these knives for the same task. I like the Smock better. I'm a hollow grind fan. I'm a Spyderco fan. I love the button activated compression lock. I like the flipper tab. I love the Spidey hole. I'm a Spyderco fan, guys. It just is what it is. The aluminum handles don't bother me. I really like this brushed aluminum. But, this is a lighter carry. It does have a little bit more edge on it. And if you are a flat grind fan, this is a flat grind as opposed to hollow grind. Not everybody likes hollow grinds. We have Crewwear versus S90V, both great steels, both nothing wrong with either of those. But, this is kind of, if you're a fan of the Smock, this is a little bit smaller, a little bit more compact of a carry. Yeah. Moving on, we have the Kaiser Bulldog. And these are kind of like the opposites as far as like sheep's foot blades go. And like, what I want to like get at is like, do you want a very straight knife? It's kind of like what I brought up in the Hinderer conversation, where as you can have a curved knife like this, like the Eclipse, or you can have a straight knife. I'm going to say a curved knife like the XM18, or a straight knife like the Eclipse. And how do you like holding your knife? And with a sheep's foot, do you want it with the blade under your knuckle? down there, cutting further down and away? Or do you want it up here, more like where you'd hold a drop point or a spear point knife? And that's just where you're comfortable with, where you want to put the pressure on the blade and how you want the knife. If you want the knife to feel like it's more out this way, away from your hand, this would be the better choice. If you want to feel more on top of the blade, like this, the Kaiser would be the better choice of the two. Now, this is another crossbar lock, and I will say that, like, $300 versus $70. Like, I just, this is titanium. It is S90V steel, but this doesn't have that special feel to it for me. It really doesn't. And like a knife reviewer like Metal Complex absolutely loved this knife. He was absolutely in love with this knife. He gave it rave reviews. I bought this knife basically because he gave it such rave reviews, and it just never really turned me on. It slices pretty good. It has okay action on it. It's smooth. It's got that crossbar lock, feeling, the kind of springy feeling to it. But right in here, it's like kind of got a spring down, pops out and springs up. It's, crossbar locks give me a feel a lot like slip joints do, where there's that, like kind of goes to here and then it snaps shut. It opens to there, and then, well, this one flies open a little bit better because there's nice bearings on it. So, it's an interesting knife. There's a lot of knives that I have that I think I prefer over this knife. In the same price range, we've got this WE Hyphen XL in the same price range as it. This is 20 CV blade steel versus the S90V. I'd probably take the S90V over the 20 CV, but this knife, the comfortability of it and just where it sits in my hand, I kind of like how I can get my thumb up over this and the blade kind of sits down, kind of like that, like the Bulldog does. This one, kind of, the knife sticks out. It gives me a feel a lot like the Smock does, where the blade is out from your hand versus like with your hand over on top of the knife. So for really the same price, I like this knife a lot more. Now, this is a bit more compact. I don't feel like this is all that big of a knife. Truly, I don't. But it definitely is a more compact blade. There's a lot more height to this blade than there is with this one. There definitely is a difference when they're closed as to this one being compact. It's taking up a lot less of your pocket. And if that's a part of your goal for the knife, then it's doing a good job of that. Now, do we, we also have a Civivi Vision FG, which is, fairly similar in the edge to this knife. They're going to work kind of the same. You have better materials on this knife than this knife, but we're talking, an extra $200. And, really you get a lot of the same feel out of these knives. Just where the blade sits in your hand and how the blade is used for slicing. Basically, what I'm getting at is that this is kind of an expensive knife for what you're getting, in my opinion. You get nice blade steel, you get titanium scales, but it doesn't, it doesn't really, scream like amazing to me. Like, this isn't this just jaw-dropping, totally breaking the mold. It's not an amazing knife. It's a good knife, not an amazing knife. And, you know, some people consider this an amazing knife. This is some people's favorite knife, and more power to them. More power to them. It's just not mine. I really don't have anything bad to say about the knife per se. I just don't have anything. It just doesn't really like set me afire. It doesn't really like make me want to carry this knife every day. There's a lot of knives that I'll pick up before this knife, and that's just what it is. And if you're a fan of Benchmade's 940, this is going to be a great knife for you. It's going to be an absolutely stellar knife for you. I'm not the biggest fan of the Benchmade 940. It's not really a knife for me. I've never really understood the long, skinny blade. It's not been my style, and this is very much in the vein of the Benchmade 940 Osborne, and that's basically it. You know, if you're an Osborne fan, you're gonna love the Piratech Kraken Tsunami, not Kraken, Tsunami. If you're not a fan of the 940, you're probably not gonna like the Tsunami, and it just basically comes down to that. The closest knife that I think today that I brought out to it that I am a big fan of is the Smock. And if you are a Smock fan, you might be able to get behind the Tsunami. Maybe if you're a Smock fan and you like crossbar locks, you'll probably like the Tsunami. If you don't like crossbar locks and you're like me, you probably won't like the Tsunami. That just kind of is what it is. Yeah, and that's really about that. You know, it's a good knife. It's got good materials. It's $300, so it's not a crazy expensive Chinese knife. It's not a cheap Chinese knife either. Um, it's nice in the fact that it's small in your pocket. It has clean lines to it. I'll give it that. And it has, you know, super steel for a blade steel. So, by all means, if you're a 940 Osborne fan, but you want something a little bit more like the Sebenza, something a little bit more high end, a little bit more classy, the Piratech Kraken / Tsunami might just be the knife for you. Otherwise, I think that there are other knives in its price range, be it, you know, a Smock or a Padre or a Hyphen XL. You know, even, you know, like even I'll say it, even like a small Sebenza is only $125 away from, you know, the Tsunami, which I guess is a good jump. But, you know, if all these knives right here are in the same price range, and I would pick this one last. So that's kind of where I sit with it. You know, if you're a fan of the 940 Osborne and you want a nicer, more classy knife, this is a good knife for you. If it's not, maybe check it out. Maybe save your money. That's up to you. I'll let you guys decide. Tell me in the comments what you guys think about the Tsunami. Tell me whether or not you think that this is worth the money, or if it's as high end as it's sold as. Does this really compete with knives like the Sebenza? Does it compete with knives like the Kunwu Padre? Does it compete with the Smock? Does it, you know, compete with the Wii-XL? Is it in that range, or is it just kind of, you know, a 940 Osborne that's gotten some titanium and a super steel with the polished super steel to it? Let me know. Anyways, this is the Piratech Tsunami. Used to be called the Kraken. I'm Garrett from the Cutting Room Knife Review. Till next time, guys, stay sharp.